Welcome to the Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad debate show, the first ever Sikh youth debate show produced in the United States with Nishkam TV and Just Punjabi. We are bringing you the cream of the crop when it comes to young debaters from the East Coast here in the United States, and they have been at it for several weeks now. We went all through the preliminaries. The semis are now here, and we are halfway through this debate stage. So before we kick off debate number 3, I'd love to welcome on the stage our contestants arguing in favor of the resolution. To my right, Jasjot Singh. Jasjot, welcome back to the stage. Arguing against the resolution, on my left side, the neg side, Sumair Singh. Sumair, welcome. Let's kick off debate 3.
All right, Jasjot, Sumair, are you guys ready for the semi-final round? Okay, we will begin with Jasjot on the pro side, and you have 4 minutes for your speech, starting now.
I affirm the resolution that all Gurdwaras in the United States should impose a ban on speeches from politicians. The value for this round is Sikhi, reflecting the core teachings of the Guru Granth. Therefore, my religious autonomy is my criterion. Keeping political speeches out of Gurdwaras protects the Sangat from external manipulation and maintains the purity of Sikh worship and seva. Contention 1. Gurdwaras must remain sacred spaces free from any political influence to preserve their religious and spiritual integrity. In Sikh tradition, leadership within the Gurdwara should remain in the hands of the Panch Pyare and the Amritdhari Sikhs, individuals who are deeply committed to Sikh values. Allowing politicians, many with conflicting personal, partisan, or even anti-Sikh agendas, into Gurdwaras risks undermining the sanctity of these spaces. Instead of relying on political figures, Sikhs should focus on creating their own political influence and shape their futures without being swayed by outside agendas. A 2017 Pew Research Center study found that nearly 60% of Sikhs in the United States believe that religious institutions should remain focused on spiritual matters over political issues, quantifying that nearly 84% of Americans agree that political polarization is an increasingly pressing issue. Despite visits by figures like Barack Obama after the 2012 Oak Creek Gurdwara shooting, little tangible action has followed to address the safety and well-being of Sikhs. Contention 2. Banning political speeches prevents division within the Sikh community and ensures unity among the Sangat. Sikh communities are diverse, with differing views on political involvement. When politicians speak at Gurdwaras, their speeches often represent specific partisan views, which can create division. For instance, if a politician from a controversial party is invited to speak, it could alienate a portion of the Sangat who disagree with that party's platform. A 2021 Pew Research study found that 56% of Asian Americans, including Sikhs, are politically unaffiliated. This means that many members of the Sikh community may feel alienated by political endorsements or speeches in a religious setting. To preserve unity, it is vital to ensure that Gurdwaras remain neutral spaces. Contention 3. Prohibiting political speeches protects Gurdwaras from being exploited as platforms for personal or partisan agendas. Gurdwaras are meant to serve as centers of spirituality, community service, and selflessness. Unfortunately, political figures often seek to exploit these spaces for personal or partisan gain. For example, in 2018, Indian officials were reportedly trying to use United States Gurdwaras to promote the Indian government political agenda, suppressing pro-Khalistan movement. This example demonstrates how Gurdwaras can be vulnerable to manipulation by politicians with personal interests or agendas that do not align with the Gurdwara's spiritual mission. Moreover, the assassination attempt on Gurpatwant Singh Pannan, a vocal advocate for Khalistan, illustrates the increasing danger of political violence surrounding Sikh activism. In such a volatile environment, Gurdwaras should not become venues for intense political discourse that could put their congregations at risk. Therefore, the presence of political speeches in Gurdwaras does not serve the interests of the Sangat, but rather introduces a risk of exploitation and division. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jasjot. Sumair, would you like to use any prep time before your first speech and rebuttal?
Yes, please. I'll take 4 minutes.
4 minutes starting now. Your 4 minutes of prep time are up. You now have 7 minutes for your first speech and rebuttal, starting now.
I negate the resolution all Gurdwaras in the USA should impose a ban on speeches from politicians. My value is Sikhi, therefore my Sikh framework is Meedi Peedi. My first contention is the concept of banning speeches from politicians violates the principle of Meedi Peedi. In an article by the Sikh Institute, it states this report aims to understand and explore how the Meedi Peedi doctrine influences the political and spiritual behavior of Sikhs worldwide. Banning speeches from politicians is a direct attack on the core principle of Meedi Peedi, which unites the power of worldly leadership in Meedi with the guiding force of spiritual wisdom in Peedi. This principle isn't just an abstract idea. It's about ensuring that leaders speak out for the people, address their struggles, and guide society through both political action and moral integrity. Silencing politicians robs us of our right to hear out leaders' voices, to be challenged, inspired, and held accountable. It undermines the very essence of democracy and strips away the balance between power and responsibility. By silencing politicians, we weaken the foundation of a just society, one where leadership is meant to serve both the practical and moral needs of the people. This isn't just a political issue, it's a fight for our society in itself. My second contention is political leaders can speak to benefit Sikh values as they are our representatives. Politicians, especially those in democratic nations, often have a role in upholding religious freedom and tolerance. Visiting Gurdwaras could signal their commitment to these values, showing that they respect all religions and communities. It can also serve as an opportunity to reaffirm their support for religious diversity and highlight the importance of peaceful coexistence. In an article by Northwestern, it states, "It's hard to discuss politics in Brampton East without two names coming up, the Honorable Gurdwaras Singh Mully and Jagmeet Singh. Mully held the MPC in East Brampton for 18 consecutive years and was the first politician in the Western world to wear a turban in public office. No form of headgear was allowed in the Commons until Mully petitioned to have the law changed in 1993. It is politicians such as Jagmeet Singh and Gurdwaras Singh Mully that can make a difference for Sikhs. Without allowing these politicians to make their mark for our community, it becomes nearly impossible for changes to be made from a nationwide perspective. We need political leaders in order to truly make a difference, and allowing them to speak freely to our Sangul is crucial to do that. My third contention is throughout Sikh history, political leaders have always been a part of the Sangat. In an article by the Global Institute for Sikh Studies, it states political activity is one facet of life in the Gurdwara, and because of its size and its location in New York City, the Richmond Hill Gurdwara rapidly emerged as a key Sikh center with the United States. By the late 1970s, Sikh politicians from the Punjab considered it an honor to be invited to Richmond Hill Gurdwara. Political leaders have always been a part of the Sangat. Sikh politicians from Punjab, such as Gurcharan Singh Tora and Hukam Singh, considered it an honor to be invited to the Richmond Hill Gurdwara. This shows that Sikh political leaders have historically been closely tied to Gurdwaras, both spiritually and politically. The involvement of high-ranking political figures, like the president of the SGPC and former speaker of the Indian Parliament, within a significant Sikh institution in the United States, demonstrates how political leadership and community life have always been intertwined in the Sikh tradition. The Gurdwara is not just a spiritual hub, but also a political one, where leaders who emphasize Meedi engage with the Peedi aspects of Sikh life. This intersection reinforces the notion that political leaders have long been a part of the Sangat. reflecting the deep connection between Sikh politics and religious community life. I concede the rest of my time for my neg case and transitioning into my rebuttal. The opposing side, in their first contention, mentioned the ideas that Gurdwaras must be sacred places for Sikhs, just for worship. I want to bring up the aspect in my first contention, the idea of meeti-piti. There needs to be a balance in our Gurdwara, not just worship, but also political. As I stated, banning speeches for politicians is a direct attack on the core principle of meeti-piti, because meeti represents the worldly leadership, while piti represents the spiritual wisdom. As I mentioned earlier, it's not just an abstract idea. It's about knowing that our politicians have to be able to advocate for us. And in the second contention, the opposing side mentioned that banning political speeches allows for unity. And in this, they talk about the division and being misled by the politicians. But not all politicians can sway us. It is up to our trusted Gurdwara committees to vet the politicians who can impact our Sangat in a good way. Although I understand some politicians can sway our interests, we cannot suppress our activism by not listening to political leaders like Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwala, who always talked in political interest of Sikhi. In the third contention, the opposing side mentioned that prohibiting political speeches allows for personal gain. I want to reiterate the idea of Gurbakh Singh Mali, who was the first political leader who was able to wear a dastard in office. And this was a huge accomplishment. He was one of the first people to accomplish this task. And it was a movement that inspired our entire future generations, and it can inspire the youth. You mentioned the idea of the youth being influenced in the entire system, but the youth needs these political leaders in order to take the next step for society. I can see the rest of my time.
All right, thank you, Sumair. Jasjot, how much prep time would you like to use?
May I have 1 minute and 30 seconds, please?
1 minute, 30 seconds, starting now. All right, Jasjot, your 90 seconds of prep are up. You now have 3 minutes to begin your rebuttal speech, starting now.
Judge, my valid premise is Sikhi, upheld by my criterion of religious autonomy, which provides the clearest framework for today's round. I will now address my opponent's case and refute their claims. My opponent claims that political speeches are essential for empowering the Sikh community, but this argument fundamentally overlooks the sacred role of the Gurdwara. Gurdwaras are spiritual places where Sikhs gather to worship, reflect, and engage together. Introducing political speeches into these spaces dilutes their spiritual purpose. Think of a school. While education is key, if every class turned into a political debate, the original purpose of learning would be lost. Similarly, the Gurdwara's primary purpose is to nurture the soul, not to serve as a political arena, and to sikh or learn. By allowing political speeches, we risk turning Gurdwaras into platforms for partisan agenda. Secondly, my opponent also argues that banning political speeches would prevent Sikhs from engaging with politicians. However, this is a misunderstanding. Politicians can still enter Gurdwaras and join the Sangat just like any other member. There is no restriction on politicians visiting and participating in the community. This issue is not whether politicians can interact with Sikhs, but whether speeches should be allowed. Just as we wouldn't invite a politician to give a lecture in the middle of a classroom, we shouldn't give them a platform in the middle of the Gurdwara. Also, something to note is that politicians can always have their own ulterior motives, and their support may be surface level. Also, politicians may not only just be of Indian, Punjabi, or Sikh descent, they can be from anywhere around the world. Lastly, my opponent insists that political speeches are necessary for advocating for Sikh rights. But allowing politicians to speak at Gurdwaras opens the door for division. Sikhs, like all communities, hold diverse political views, naturally, and a politician's speech may alienate some members. This is especially true when a politician represents a particular party or agenda. The very purpose of banning political speeches is to protect the Gurdwara from becoming a battleground for conflicting ideologies. Think of it like a family dinner table. You wouldn't invite someone to speak about controversial topics if it would upset the peace of the family. Therefore, I conclude my rebuttals.
All right, thank you, Jasjot. Would you like to use more prep time before your final speech?
Could I use my remaining time, please?
Yes, you have 4.5 minutes, starting now. Jasjot, this concludes the rest of your prep time. You now have 3 minutes for your final speech, starting now.
As we approach the conclusion of today's debate, I will crystallize the key points I believe I firmly won and showcase how they systemically obliterate my opponent's case. Firstly, my opponent argues that there is no harm in allowing politicians into Gurdwaras, claiming that these spaces are neutral venues. This is wrong. Gurdwaras are meant to be sanctuaries, places where Sikhs gather to meditate, pray, and engage in seva. To allow politicians to step in and deliver speeches is to dilute the core purpose of these spaces. Imagine a doctor's office. Its primary goal is to heal, not to host a speech. Furthermore, my opponent will likely say that there is no harm in hearing from different political leaders, but what they fail to recognize is the division that this causes. Gurdwaras are places of unity, where Sikhs from all backgrounds come together. Politics is often polarizing. Some in the Sangat may agree with one leader but disagree with another, causing rifts between them. Again, in 2021, Pew Research found that a significant portion of Sikhs are politically unaffiliated. So, when politicians speak, they may alienate many who do not share their views. By banning political speeches, we preserve unity, ensuring the Sangat remains focused on shared values, not divisive partisan ideologies. Lastly, my opponent claims that politicians need these platforms to reach out to the community. But here's the truth. They can still advocate for their causes and engage with Sikhs one-on-one without taking over the Gurdwara with their speeches. Politicians are always welcome to enter the Gurdwara and take place in Sangat and participate in community. Nothing in this resolution prevents political engagement. It simply ensures that political speeches do not take place in Gurdwaras. Just because we ban political speeches doesn't mean we silence politicians. It means we protect the Gurdwara's role as a spiritual, not political sanctuary. Therefore, the clear winner of this round is the affirmative side. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jasjot. Sumair, would you like to use your remaining prep time?
Yes, please.
You have 2 minutes, starting now. Sumair, this concludes your remaining prep time. You now have 3 minutes to begin your final speech for the negative, starting now.
I thoroughly believe that after this fruitful debate, I am the victor for a multitude of reasons. First of all, my opponent clearly misinterpreted my point of meaty peaty. It is a balance. I'm not claiming to create a battleground for the Gurdwara, but rather a place where we can have a mix of both perspectives of the political enlightenment and spiritual enlightenment. Secondly, the idea of creating a division within the Sangat, which my opponent mentioned in his second contention, doesn't take into account the idea of people like Sant Jasjot Singh Bandrawala and Gurbakh Singh Malli, who were key Sikh figures who helped us take the next step in advocating for Sikhi. The idea of personal gain is easily contradicted by the idea of the Gurdwara, by the idea of the Gurdwara committee members who choose the people that get to speak on our podiums and on our stages. The Gurdwara committee people are responsible for picking out the correct people to speak and advocating for the correct people in order to better our learning of Sikhi. They're not going to pick some random person who's not going to help contribute to the idea of Sikhi, but rather someone who would help push further the religious ideas of Sikhi. Furthermore, my third contention of throughout Sikh history, political leaders have always been a part of the Sangat was unattacked. The mention of Gurcharan Singh Tora and Hukam Singh coming to the Richmond Hill Gurdwara was not countered at any point. And all of my opponent's contentions were refuted by the sense that in the first contention, Gurdwaras must be places for the Sikhs just for worship. It was refuted by the idea of meedi pidi. The second contention, allowing for division, was refuted by the idea of figures such as Gurcharan Singh Tora, Meli, and Bindarwala. And thirdly, the third contention that the affirmative case mentioned, prohibiting political speeches allows for partisan gain. What the affirmative case fails to realize is that this personal gain does not always have to happen. Again, it is our Gurdwara committee members who decide who goes and speaks on the podium. It is not so they can't just come inside and go on the podium. It's of course people can enter the Gurdwara, eat langar, do seva, anything, and everyone's welcome in the Gurdwara as equals. However, to be on the podium, you have to go through a certain process, which my opponent failed to realize. Therefore, I believe that I thoroughly won this debate. I rest my case.
All right, thank you, contestants, for a great first semifinal round. That concludes this.
So that was an intense round. I think it was very, back and forth, was following, a lot to follow. So, one thing that sticks out to me is, as the audience, you're watching this, you're getting certain perspectives. Sometimes it's hard to understand who really is a clear winner. Mm-hmm. And so, I really mentioned how your guys' flows, like, the written notes you've been taking, detailing the arguments that were made and how they were carried over and who was responded to, are going to factor into your final decision for this one. I'm really interested to know the results. And yeah, I'll leave you guys to it. This is going to be a tough one.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. So for Jasjot, we have his values of religious autonomy. Mm-hmm. And in line with that the Gurdwaras must remain purely religious and stay deeply committed to the Sikh values. He was mostly worried about any politicians coming in with like anti-Sikh sentiment or even anything that would detract from the religious priority of the Gurdwaras.
Right.
And then he brought up a few statistics as well from, I believe, Pew Institute about how 66% of, I believe, was it just Americans that I can't remember what the audience was, but it wasn't specific to Sikhs, I believe, or it might have been.
I don't think any of his data was specific to Sikhs.
Yes. I think
the only data was 35% of Sikhs are politically unaffiliated. That's that one Sikh specific one. He had another statistic in his next one that had to do with Asian Americans. Yeah. And I believe this one has to do with religious.
I think it's religious.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Should be spiritual.
Should stay non-political or something like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then his other one was that 54% of Asian Americans believe that politics and religion is becoming an issue.
Yeah, and he also cited that example of President Obama speaking at Oak Creek. And I want to dive into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
And then his second contention that it ensures unity. So he brought up the true fact that politics can be very alienating. And then that's where his statistic really came in handy, about 35% of Sikhs being politically unaffiliated. So you don't know, that's 1/3 of the population, right? So you don't know who you're going to offend, who you're going to cause divides between. Mm-hmm. And then we know, unfortunately, even as open of a mind as you want to keep, at the end of the day, like, we can be influenced by, oh, this person thinks this way on this matter, and this person thinks that way on that matter. Yeah. You're going to align yourself with one or the other, and then naturally a drift will start to form in the community. So I can understand that. Mm-hmm. And the main thing I like that he specified on was that we need to keep it as a neutral space. That seemed to be like a common trend.
I think, like, shifting over to a little bit of what Sumair was talking about, right? And his value of meeting. I thought it was very strong. And we briefly talked about it in the other semifinal match, debate that went on, right? Like, about thought that maybe might have been a better one for this for this topic. So like seeing it come out in this semifinal match, I think it was good and I think he did a really good job. And to Jasjot's first point or third contention, as you were mentioning that, you know, everything he had brought up that like, you know, there needs to be this balance. But I think Sumair's first contention really like clashed with that. Yeah. Right? Because him and repeatedly like just trying to hone in on the fact that like, no, we need to be like, this is the main priority and like, the worship aspect is the main priority. We need to be, you know, religious autonomy. But Sumair throughout the entire debate, I felt like was just, I'm not saying that the religious aspect is not important. Right. You just got to find a balance. Exactly. I'm not saying it. Yeah. The guru said it, right? So exactly. Like, So I thought it was a balance. Yeah. So I thought it was a really good contention and clashed with some of the contention that came up with.
Yeah, I think that's a 1-for-1. Like in terms of his specified Jasjot's contention one clashed almost directly with Sumair's contention one. So we love to see that.
Yeah. And I wish Jasjot kind of followed in and honed in more on like the specifics of meaty beaty. Like in his rebuttal, he talked about how like we don't really need speeches just for meaty beaty, and like he included like he gave that analogy of school and how we don't want to track from the learning and stuff, which I thought was a really good analogy and helped make sense. Yeah, there were a lot of them. Yeah, but then I just feel like it was I wanted to hear a little bit more about like how Gurdwaras can still maintain the balance of meaty beaty without these speeches and like or how they already do that. Because then it was just kind of like you're saying they're not essential and you're giving this analogy, but again like Sikhism is different from other religions too, in that we have this value of meaty beaty that like a lot of other ones don't. So I think diving in a little bit more would have been more convincing for me.
I think he did that indirectly because he addressed a very important nuance, which is when he did address the resolution directly by saying that we are stating that you cannot give a political speech in the Gurdwara. The politicians can still be involved in the Gurdwaras, right? Yeah. So that was an important distinction that he had made because a lot of, I feel like, what Sumair's arguments, I think, a lot of Sumair's arguments were about inviting political leaders. They can speak on Sikh political benefit, as well as the components of meaty. But I think the way that he described, like, we're just trying to eliminate speeches. But and he specifically said political activism can still occur. Yeah. So then he addressed that in my mind.
Yes. But I mean, to that point, like again, I thought Jasjot brought a lot of good analogies. Yeah. But I think to like what you were saying, like the analogies were there, but I felt like sometimes he was just throwing analogies out there, but like there were like it would have been nice to have more specific.
Yeah, like the the doctor's office one in his crystallization. Yeah, I wish unnecessary. I wish he would have if he had elaborated a little bit, like just like a doctor's office feels the soul, but feels the body. Going to the Gurdwara side feels the soul. If he'd expanded on it, it would have made more sense. But he was just like doctor's offices and political speeches.
And then I think. I was gonna add like continue with that like even the other stuff like even when he was giving like the school analogy, right, like. Yeah, the analogy is there, but like again, he's like, yeah, you don't want a politician to speak at just school, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, we do get politicians that like other folks come in and speak at school. That's like, even though he was giving these analogies, I felt like he could have done more. Right. And I think like what you were saying, like where he specifically said that the resolution doesn't negate like political activism or political discourse. I just talking about speech specifically. Yeah. Amazing point. Yeah. But it came at the very end of his visualization, right? If he had, I think, brought it up in the rebuttal and like flushed it out throughout, because I think Sumair's meaty beaty was really strong, and I would have liked for it to be like poked at a little bit earlier. Rather than
I see what you mean. I wish that he would address the meaty beaty like head on. Yeah, I agree. But he did make it, the first time he addressed that nuance was in his rebuttal, from what I saw. Like his when he said that politicians can still visit Gurdwaras give speeches. Yeah. So I think that what I have in my notes said that indirectly addressed the meaty beaty, as well as that specifically addressed the nuance that Sumair was trying to set up about vetting politicians who are going to come and speak. I think that's a wonderful point that Sumair made. Yes. Right? That we're not just going to invite everybody. Yeah. Right? There's going to be a formal vetting process to make sure that it was because one thing Sumair does really well is addressing nuance. Every round that I've been in, and I've judged him at least 4 or 5 times at this point, he has always taken a moment to address nuance in the debates, which is so important.
And I think Jasjot also, he has a lot of great indirect ideas, but he's not attacking them directly. Sumair had so many like substantial pieces of evidence. Like he listed like 4 or 5 politicians in his first speech alone about examples. And the thing is, like, these are great examples of like Sikh politicians who like undoubtedly probably have used the Gurdwara as a platform and then have made changes. But Jasjot kind of like went around that by saying, oh yeah, like they can still participate in the Gurdwara and be supported. But he could have very easily been like, where's your proof that their speeches in the Gurdwara really helped them rise? Like he didn't address any specific names or any specific points. So like you can extend that, but it wasn't a direct one-to-one.
I agree because he didn't specify. Because one of the thoughts that came across my mind when he was mentioning the political leaders, including it's a member of parliament, Mully, Canada, right? He had specifically mentioned how, you know, before Mully was in office, you weren't able to wear any kind of religious headwear while in office, right? That is a phenomenal point that speaks to the argument that political leaders can have Sikh best interests at heart. And they can advance Sikh interests and agendas. And I'm 100% on board with that. But I agree with you in that, but that just means that that person was Sikh. That doesn't address the nuance of the debate topic, which is, do we know that this person gave political speeches at the Gurdwaras or not? I'm sure he did.
But I think, I mean, I might have probably just putting this on Sumair, and he probably didn't read it like that. But like when Sumair brought up those specific examples, he first brought it up in terms of like, these political leaders can help speak to Sikh values, right? But then I also saw that he brought it up as a rebuttal. He brought it up again to the third contention about how politicians can they just ultimately exploit the platform,
right, to show
for personal gain, right? But then he's like, no, but Mully, it wasn't a personal gain; it was a communal gain, right? Like now we're able to wear this thought and serve. But then I don't know. I felt like he was speaking, and I felt like both of them did it at a point where they were both at one point being only specifically either talking about non-Sikh politicians or only talking about Sikh politicians. Right. So I feel like both of them were flawed in that sense, where they try to work very specific. Whereas like the resolution is broad, right? And it doesn't say if they're Sikh, non-Sikh, if they're from the Sangat, not from the Sangat, right?
And again, like Sumair's examples weren't like super rock solid, like because he didn't have a lot of linkage between how like the speeches in the Gurdwara were crucial for these leaders to like come into power and inspire people. So he could have had that like addressed directly, and that would have been really great. But I feel like Jasjot just kind of like didn't address any of those directly. He kind of just took it for word. So
I agree.
Like analogies are great for the audience to understand it, but I think beyond that, we want to see like the direct evidence. Now. Like the ideas aren't so complex that we need a lot of crazy theories.
Exactly. The analogy is more so just to communicate the idea, but you still need the concrete evidence to defend what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's what Jasjot's like biggest flaw was. Like he had great analogies, but wasn't really specific on them.
And I also think with this case, like he could have easily found examples of like some politicians who maybe misused the Gurdwara. I know it's probably hard, but I think just having one like kind of substantial thing there in his favor, even as a rebuttal, would have been amazing.
And I feel like his speaking on rebuttals. So in the pro rebuttal, to the second point that politicians can speak to benefit Sikh values. That's how I got it. He gave Jasjot gave a rebuttal that his main rebuttal was that it's still open. Having these politicians come in can open the doors to division, and he basically just rehashed his own second contention again. And I appreciate like him mentioning his own thing again. I 100% do. But at the same time, I feel like it wasn't like. He could have been more effective in actually addressing his opponent's points instead of just being like, I disagree, here's what I said. Right? Because that's not what the rebuttal's for.
I feel like that's what he did a lot though, right? I feel like in his rebuttal, he says, I disagree. This is what I said, right? So I think, you brought that up. I think that's what he did a lot.
I think it just felt like a lot of recycling of his contentions, but I just felt like the lack of evidence there made it like feel a little bit repetitive to me.
From lack of evidence on Jasjot.
Jasjot,
I loved both of their crystallizations, specifically the fact that they were in a way like calling each other out. Right?
I had the strong opening.
This very strong opening. That's why I put obliterate my opponent, right? And I like underlined obliterate. I was like he came in and like he started with that, and then like he ended like with repeating the resolution. Like it doesn't negate the resolution, but political discourse. But this just means it's about speech, right? And then again with Sumair, like again opening. My opponent clearly misrepresented or misinterpreted Meaty Beatty. Right? Like clearly called out, like he never brought a Meaty Beatty up at all. He never really understood. Right. I'm talking about balance. I'm not saying religious autonomy isn't important. I'm talking about balance. Yeah. And then he, ends it with like, to be on the podium at the Gurdwara, there is a process. You have to go through the process, right? So I thought both of the crystallization was amazing.
And it was interesting how they focus on different things. So like Jasjot focused on going through all the negative contentions and then saying how he refuted it. Like it also reinforces his own argument, which again was kind of his rebuttal style. Right. Whereas Sumair kind of went through like all of his contentions that went unopposed by Jasjot. So I think both of them were effective in just showing why they won. Right.
Let's go for this because this is a close one. Let's just go back to the simple framework. So we'll go to
value,
clash and flow, value criterion, and the quality of evidence. Let's just knock through those.
Okay.
All right. We have the consensus. You know what to do?
Yes, I do. Yes.
So one very common type of fallacy is, we call it the moving goalposts. So this is when, when you enter a debate, there's a clear objective. When your opponent, however, keeps changing that objective, it can become impossible to win the debate. So, let's say you're debating something and your opponent says, I never said that, I actually said this. Then you spend your time debating that. Your opponent says, I never said that, I actually said this. It's a debate to infinity and you're never going to get to the end of it. So this is why we encourage, one of the strategies that we encourage our students for the formal debates, and that something that's important for the judges to do, is write down the actual arguments. Because this is a very common thing people will do in verbal arguments. And sometimes people can't help it. Maybe it's just, people forget what they originally said, but it's good to have that argument written down so you can point to it and say, well, this was the point of the original debate. So if your opponent then insists on moving the goalposts, you can say, well, that's a debate for another time, but let's end it on this one. So this is called the moving goalpost fallacy.
Welcome to the Kaur and Singh Vaad Vivaad debate competition. We are in the thick of it in the semi-final round of this debate show. Debate 3 was an exciting matchup between these contestants, and you've been seeing these contestants now argue both the pro and the neg side of the resolution. I might remind you here that while the judges' criteria is fixed solidly to the Lincoln Douglas debate model, there are also speaker points that are awarded in the case of a tie. And the speaker points help the judges determine, if there is a tie, which contestant did better. So today, for the winner of this debate, I have the results right here. The judges have spoken. The live audience is in the studio right here in New York City. But of course, before I get to the main results, we're going to do audience favorites. Viewers, thank you so much for your participation and engagement throughout these episodes. These contestants love knowing that the folks at home are just as connected to their journey. So, this week's debate, debate 3 of the competition, your audience favorite was Jasjot Singh. Jasjot, the audience has chosen you as their favorite this week. What do you have to say to everyone watching?
Thank you so much for your support. I'm so glad that you enjoyed my semifinals performance.
All right, folks, here's the moment you've been waiting for. This is the result of debate 3. We are one debate away from the final competition matchup. Debate 3 winner, as determined by the judges for the Vaad Vivaad competition, is Sumair Singh.
I'm Kaur Singh, a tech professional and real estate investor. Like many people, I used to think the only way to build wealth was by working hard at a 9-to-5 job. That all changed when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The book opened my eyes to the power of investing, how real estate can create passive income and long-term wealth rather than just relying on a paycheck. I realized that building a portfolio of properties was a way to create financial freedom and gain control over my future. So, I dove into real estate investing, and let me tell you, it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. Investing is key to securing financial independence. Whether you're looking for side income or a long-term strategy, real estate can make it happen. I'm passionate about giving back and teaching others how to get started on their investing journey too. So, if you're interested in learning more about real estate investing, feel free to follow me on Instagram and shoot me a DM.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. This is Harman Singh, Executive Director of the Sikh Coalition. For more than 20 years, the Sikh Coalition has worked to reduce hate, violence, and discrimination experienced by the Sikh community. Nationwide, we work in the court system, in policy, in education, community development, and media and communications to raise the Sikh profile and build a new future for Sikh youth. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.